Hi, Zoe.
Hi, Anne Howard. How are you doing?
Good, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. We're just waiting for our speaker to arrive. So if you want to go and make a cup of tea or have a little break from your desk, don't worry, you've got a couple of minutes to do so.
Okay, I'll do that then. I'm just glad
Okay.
I'm in the workshop. The hardest thing is navigating around there. Where am I going?
Yeah, you definitely want to be prepared. Yeah, I get the feeling there.
Okay, I'll see you in 2
Okay.
minutes.
All right, see you soon.
Hello.
Hello. I'm just trying to get hold of Captain Sam, as I know he's had some access issues before, so just giving him a ring to make sure that he's all okay getting on. So I'm just going to put myself on mute and leave you to it a moment.
No problem. Thanks, Zoe.
Where's the pink check shirt then, Phil?
Claire, it's a disaster. It must be in some dirty clothes basket somewhere. When Sal gets back in, be assured she will be getting the full blame for this debacle.
Poor Sal. She'll probably find it scrunched up in a ball somewhere. Shoved.
I know I wore it last week, so I don't know where it is anyway. Doesn't matter. I just feel like I've let Gareth down big time.
I know. Well, you've let yourself down, you let Gareth down, you let HPMA Wales down by not wearing the check pink shirt like Gareth.
That reminds me of my favourite joke. What did the inflatable child say to the inflatable teacher in the inflatable school?
Well, I think I can guess.
The inflatable teacher says to the inflatable child, "You've let me down, you've let the school down, but most of all, you've let yourself down."
Boom, boom. He's here all week, everybody. Oh, dearie.
You didn't really get this with me hosting a session, did you?
It's been a good day so far, though, I think. Hopefully everybody agrees. Everybody enjoying? Yes. Good. Danny's got a thumbs up. Him and Angharad are nodding away. Good. Kim's probably written an entire book of notes of things that she wants to do now, new Kim.
You know me too well, Claire.
I know.
We've been together for too long. Oh yes.
I'm looking forward to it, as I said earlier. I'm looking forward to the debrief.
Oh yes.
What's that star you've got behind you, Claire?
Oh, it's my IKEA Christmas star that I couldn't be bothered to put away last Christmas, so it just stays there now because I've decided I like it so much as a lamp. It might as well stay.
Fair enough. Well, it's almost back in fashion, isn't it?
It is, yeah. It's nearly that time again, you know.
It is.
So let's hope Captain Sam's going to be able to join us then. Otherwise you and I, Phil, are going to have to talk about leadership in the British Army.
Yeah. We've got to draw lessons from the army that we can apply in the NHS.
I've just made you a moderator, Phil. So just in case your view has changed, that's why.
Okay.
Okay.
That sounds like responsibility, which I don't feel entirely comfortable with, Zoe. But I'll.
It's fine. I can take it away if anything goes wrong.
That's what I like to hear.
What? Philip, I got on the conference, so shush.
I'm not sure Rachel realised that we all heard her telling off whoever was coming through the door.
We just need a few pets coming across the keyboard screens now, don't we? That's.
I'm waiting for when Reese gets back from school and makes his usual appearance.
Well, Reese used to make appearances before lockdown.
That's true. That's true. He misses it, actually, if I'm honest, since he's gone back to school. He misses the ability to pop into every meeting.
We miss
And
it.
when?
I remember him turning up when we had a coffee in the village hotel.
Yes, and we had to listen to his entire conversation with his mates on Google Chrome.
Yeah, is he free now? Is he free now, just in case Captain Sam can't make it?
He's not. No, he's not, unfortunately. He's still in school. Yay!
Okay, I think Sam is on his way, so it shouldn't be too much longer now. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoe.
Thank you, Zoe.
Ah.
How's the new job going, Danny?
Really well.
There's a bit too much of a delay then.
How are you all?
Bless you. You can tell us offline, Dan, what's happening.
Yes, it's been quite a baptism of fire, but you know, I like a challenge, so that's okay.
And I'm sure you're up to that challenge as well. No doubt about it.
Thanks, Claire. We'll see.
How are we doing, Zoe?
So Sam was in, but his it's not going to mean anything to you, but he wasn't live, so I think he's got to try and reconnect, and then hopefully we will be okay. Bear with us just a couple of minutes. I'm hoping it'll be sorted.
Okay. Technology is a wonderful thing, isn't it? When it works.
Okay, I think we might be just about ready. Here we go.
There we are. Hello, Sam. Can you hear us all right?
Yes, I can. Hello.
Brilliant. Hi, Sam. I'm Phil Bushby. I was just going to do a bit of an introduction, then hand over to you, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine.
Brilliant. Well, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining this particular session. It's great to have you join this one, and as Claire was saying a couple of minutes ago, hope that you are enjoying the rest of the day so far. It's great that Captain Sam can join us this afternoon. It's a great privilege that he's been able to do that. And if you were involved in the early days of the COVID response, then you will know that the Army and the NHS worked together on a number of things. And the Army came in and and help support the NHS in a number of ways. I certainly, when I was in Public Health Wales, saw them coming in and helping from a planning perspective and those type of things. So it's great to be able to have Captain Sam here today to hear about some of his personal experiences, and also for us as an NHS organisations to learn from the Army and some of the things that they have done, and see if there are transferable things that can come across there. So that's absolutely fantastic to have Captain Sam with us. I think originally you come from Pembrokeshire in West Wales, and you'd have seen, hopefully, in the biog that we've got on Sam, that he started his military career in 2014. He began training there at the Royal Military Academy in Sandhurst, and has been a commissioned officer for 5 years, and has led soldiers on training in Kenya, Canada, Germany, as well as around the UK. He received a Joint Commander's Commendation on Operations in Estonia, and currently works on the Northern European desk in the Army's Land Operations Command. So loads of experience there, Sam. It seems in quite a short space of time to me as well. So a real privilege to have you with us. And I will come back in at the end to see if there's any questions and to facilitate a Q&A at the end. I should have said at the start, my name's Phil Bushby. I'm one of the members of the HPMA committee. It's, as I say, great to welcome you all here this afternoon. If anything goes wrong at all, it's great that Zoe's here as well, and she will bail us out of anything that goes wrong technically. Is that right, Zoe?
I'll do my best.
Excellent. Thanks ever so much. So, Sam, I'll hand over to you. And as I said at the start, privileged that you're here. Thanks ever so much for joining us today.
Lovely, thanks so much. Great to be here. I should point out I'm upstairs in my spare room. We've not suddenly started a sewing workshop in Land Operations Command, even though as part of basic training we do need to learn a certain amount of darning to repair clothing. I'm sure you can imagine it's pretty torn up in the field and on operations. So not my sewing equipment, not the Army sewing equipment. Just my spare room. Zoe, can you just confirm how long we've got for the session today, and how long I can speak for? Just make sure I know.
Yeah, that's fine. We've got until about 3, so there's about 50 minutes left, and then we go straight into a break after that. So
perfect. That's absolutely spot on. Lovely stuff. Okay, so hello everyone. Phil's already given me an absolutely fantastic introduction, probably better than I deserve. And just to make you aware, the reason that I think I've been asked to come along and speak today is I was part of the military liaison team that worked with Public Health Wales when the joint command in Wales got stood up. So I was working as liaison officer alongside NHS colleagues to bring online the MTUs, and then I stayed on a little bit longer just to help with processes and see if there's any advice we could give from a military perspective. What I would say right from the outset is we were in this together when it came to COVID, the NHS and the military, and I am under no illusions today. This is not me telling you that the Army knows everything about leadership. There is as much we can learn from the NHS and other civilian organisations as hopefully we can teach. So please don't think this is me telling you that we've got the gold-plated solution. This will be as much about a dialogue as possible. What I'd say as well is I think because we're in the classroom here, you can raise your hands. So if you have got any questions, please just raise your hands via the chat bar on the side, and I'll do my best to answer them there and then. If not, we'll just hold until the end, and we'll try and have about 10 minutes of question and answer at the end. As Phil has already covered, so I joined the Army in 2005, went to the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst for a year. I'll touch on that a little bit longer. Took over command of my first platoon of about 30 soldiers about a year and a half later when I arrived in the Royal Welsh. Following on from that, I then went on operations in Estonia, where I was the Information Activities and Outreach Officer, which basically meant that I was in charge of information operations. For those of you who don't know what that is, it's basically Facebook posts. And then moved on to being a company second in command. A company is about 100 soldiers, and we're armoured infantry, so you have about 100 soldiers and about 20 vehicles to look after. And then in my current job, I'm a desk officer for Northern Europe. So If it's military and it's happening in Northern Europe, it's me who's got to try and coordinate it and make sure it moves around. So it is just as easy as it sounds. So without further ado, I think we'll get underway. So if I could have slide, please, Zoe, we'll start talking through. The other thing I will say is that my language will probably in some cases be slightly alien, particularly from an NHS background. We're often a little bit more direct with our language, potentially. So if you hear me using the word subordinate, it is not meant in a derogatory or a patronising way. That's just simply how we refer to anyone who is junior to us or below us in the chain of command. I learned from my time in Public Health Wales that the NHS, you use language much similar to colleagues, and it's a much nicer way to be spoken to, actually, I have to admit, than being in the army. But please just bear with me from a military perspective. We can be a little bit more direct in our language. So, as I previously said, I started my career in the same way that every other British officer in the army does, and that's with a year of training in the Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. So that's important to us because it gives us a shared understanding, a shared grounding with training that is common to every single officer across the army. Now that means whatever cap badge you might go into, so whether you're an infantier, an artillery officer, an engineer, a medic, that you have a grounding in the same training and the same leadership skills as anyone else in the army. And that's fantastic because it means that when you engage with people who have a different skill to you, you have a shared background and a shared understanding. Some of the training can be quite hard and can be quite unpleasant, but that means that gives you even more of a shared understanding, and you can fall back on those shared experiences. For example, one of the exercises we take part in, you have to wear gas masks for about 2 weeks. So it's always good when you meet another officer to talk about how bad the exercises were in Sandhurst. The motto of Sandhurst is serve to lead, and I think that really sums up the way we view leadership in the British Army. I like to think of it as almost an inverted pyramid, where you have to think of the Chief of the General Staff, who's the head of the army, as, although he is what we would think of at the top of the chain in terms of command, he sits at the bottom of that pyramid. And that's because everything we do in the British Army is designed to get the most junior soldier to where he needs to be to deliver effect. So whether that is war fighting, so whether that's clearing a trench, getting into a building and securing that, or whether that is in fact humanitarian aid, or in the case of COVID-19, getting that soldier into a position where he can deliver mobile testing units, for example. So we very much think of it as a upside down pyramid with our leaders there to serve the people who are actually going to have the effect. So as a manager, you need to put your soldiers before yourself. And the saying always goes when you're in Sandhurst, my soldiers, my weapon, my kit, myself. And that's the order of priority. You are the last priority and your soldiers come first. Slide, please. Oh, no, I'm in charge. I can move the slides myself. No one panic. So as an infantry officer, I then went to go and do my training in Breakout. And this sums up how we really learn leadership as infantry officers, crawling through rivers and dragging ourselves around bogs. Now, that might not sound very pleasant, and it might sound a little bit unnecessary for someone who's essentially a line manager to go crawling about in rivers left, right, and centre. And I should say that day to day, the majority of our activity as officers is fairly recognisable from what you'd understand in the NHS as a line manager. But the reason that we do this sort of training is so that our soldiers understand that we can do the job that they do. So the principle being that you would never ask one of your soldiers to do something that you yourself wouldn't be comfortable doing. So very much that's why you ground yourself in Breakout and in those basic infantry skills and those basic skills so that you can have a shared understanding and shared experience with your soldiers, no matter how junior they are and no matter what background they might come from. What that also means is that before you can even take command of your first platoon, you've done about a year and a half of training. And what I would say about the British Army is I don't think there is any other organisation that invests quite so heavily in training its leaders, both at a junior and senior level. To even take command of 30 soldiers, you need to have done at least a year and a half of training. And if you have a technical role, you've probably done even more training than that before you can take up your position. So by no means are we world leaders in trade training. Our medics aren't better than NHS medics. They just do a slightly different job. But we do invest a huge amount of time and money in preparing our leaders for whatever challenges they might face. As you'd imagine, that can often look like operations. But that training in leadership doesn't stop when you finish your initial training. You come back time and time again to do training overseas, exercises, further development courses. Every time you promote, you have to go and do another leadership course to make sure that you're ready for that next level of command. So from my own position, I've done armoured infantry training in Bathurst, which is in Canada, which is the top left-hand picture there. I have done the sort of stuff that everyone would be more comfortable with from the days where we were more heavily involved in Afghanistan, training with counterinsurgency and that sort of stuff in Kenya. And then, as I previously mentioned, we've been on operations in Estonia, where we've been looking to secure NATO's eastern boundary. And I don't know if anyone in the audience has ever been to Estonia, but I can tell you it gets pretty nippy out there. And when we took that picture, it was about -28. So as you can imagine, that comes with its own leadership challenges, making sure that soldiers remain motivated and actually remain safe. And that's your job as a leader, really, is to make sure that the people underneath you remain safe. And that can be as basic in an environment like Estonia, where you check their feet every morning to make sure they've not got a cold injury on their feet and not been frostbitten. Perfect. Which sets us up all perfectly to be ready to carry out the sort of military operations that you'd be used to seeing on the news. So whether that's deploying overseas humanitarian or going on combat missions, we're fantastic and really well set up at teaching leadership in that context. Where that doesn't always work, though, is when you get a crisis like the one we're seeing at the moment, which is COVID-19, when we could be called to step in and assist with our civilian partners who often have a great deal of going to more experience in those areas. And what was really telling for us is just how quickly we had to adapt our leadership style in order to really push down as much responsibility to our junior leaders as possible. So putting our young fusiliers and private soldiers, the people who are coming straight out of secondary school, who are 17, 18, into positions where they are going to be delivering support. And also making sure that they are in a position to deliver support, that they know that they have the trust and the belief from their superiors and those people giving orders. So I'm just going to play a short clip now, which shows you some of the work that the Royal Welsh did in the Bristol Nightingale, which hopefully give you an idea of just what a change of pace it was for us, going from kinetic warfighting operations to helping out on the COVID front line. And hopefully technology doesn't fail me.
We've just finished our first day of 4 days of training alongside our NHS colleagues, and we're working to effectively support them in the Nightingale Hospital project. So we brought with us today 60 Royal Welsh who've been training on basic hygiene, so effectively learning how to wash our hands properly and putting them under UV lights to actually check that we're doing that appropriately. We then worked on PPE, so personal protective equipment, from respirators through to the face masks and gloves, and actually using a buddy-buddy system, essentially the way that we would do with CBRN training within a medical environment. We then worked on manual handling of patients, noting that we're going to be critical care support workers, and how to get them in and out of beds, how to effectively clean them and support the NHS workers that we're going to be supporting.
So the students that have arrived today, the service people, they're exactly as I expect them to be. They turn up on time, they've turned up to each session really enthusiastically, they've asked fantastic questions, and obviously they totally appreciate the importance of the job that they're doing.
For me personally, I feel very proud, and it's something that I want to do. It's not something that I want to kind of sit back and, you know, not be involved in. As soon as we got the opportunity, and obviously they said that we were going to go into this kind of environment, I was more than happy to. And, you know, just want to get involved in, want to make a difference and help the world, and obviously help the UK.
I feel very confident. Like, the training it's been quite full packed, but like it's been broken down quite well as well. So like, I think all the information that we've been receiving and all the notes we've been receiving as well, I think is quite helpful, and hopefully it'll stick into our heads and we'll be able to continue and help in the Nightingale Hospital.
Yeah, they've been brilliant. Obviously it's not my kind of forte, this kind of stuff. So everything they've taught us so far, even from the basics of putting PPE on, basics of washing your hands, to moving patients, stuff like that. You know, something that, you know, you take on board and take very seriously. And, you know, like I said, I'm very proud to do something like this, and no, I'll do it as well as I can.
Absolutely impressed. We were all sat there eating our lunch, saying, actually, some of these young lads actually are young enough to be my son, and actually amazing that they've come here and they've given up their time, and actually what they're potentially are going to be facing for the next few weeks.
Great, so hopefully that was just a really quick introduction to let you guys know what a shock it was. I don't know why they focused so long on hand washing right at the very beginning of that video. It makes it seem as if no one in the army knows how to wash their hands properly. I can assure you that we do all know how to wash our hands, and it wasn't that much of a steep learning curve learning to do it for COVID-19. And I think what that highlights is all we could really do when we were faced with supporting the NHS during Operation Reset, which is our response to COVID, was fall back on our underlying doctrine and our underlying training, and also just to be really humble and open and accept that we don't know everything, and to lean on you all in the NHS and as our civilian partners to ensure that we're in the right place. And what I'd also say is we had to really trust our most junior members to be able to deliver. So like I said before, what you're seeing in that video is 17, 18, 19, 20-year-olds who have never done this sort of stuff before, but then are put in a position by their leaders where they're trusted to learn and then deliver what they've learned, and are trusted to actually be the experts. So, you know, from my position, if I was an officer in charge of soldiers who'd gone through that training, I would lean on those soldiers and lean on them as the subject matter experts for that training that they'd undertaken. So before we push on with the rest of the presentation, has anyone got any questions at this point that they'd like to bring out? Perfect. Stunned silence. Either means it's going really well or no one's understanding what I'm saying. Either way, we'll keep powering through. Great. So why is leadership important? I'd love to give you a pithy one-word answer, and then we could just draw stumps there and have the rest of the afternoon off. But I think it is something that is almost intangible, but allows us to achieve great things. And the key output of leadership is actually to create more leaders, not to create more followers. So from our standpoint in the army, leadership is important to us because we command formations like this. So this is an armoured infantry battle group. And you can actually, if you look at the fourth row in from the left and about the eighth vehicle back, that is actually me stood there on my own next to my warrior armed fighting vehicle. But this is an armoured infantry battle group, and it's about 1,000 people strong and about 300 vehicles, give or take. And that's commanded by one person, who's the commanding officer. So in that battle group, the most junior element of that is a fusilier. So that's your most junior soldier. And as I previously mentioned, he's going to be 17, 18, 19, sorry, he or she is going to be 17, 18, 19, just left school. And the rest of our job as leaders is to get them into a position where they can have the effect that they need to have. As you can see, that seems like an incredibly small cog in a massive, massive machine. That junior soldier then is part of a fire team, which is made up of 4 soldiers commanded by a lance corporal. And that fire team is a part of a section which is made up of 8 soldiers and an armoured vehicle, which is commanded by a corporal. That section is part of a platoon, which is made up of roughly 30 soldiers and 4 vehicles. that platoon sits in a company which is made up of 3 platoons and associated supporting equipment. And that company sits in a battle group, as I previously mentioned, of about 1,000 soldiers and 300 bits of equipment. That's commanded by one man, which is the commanding officer. So why is leadership important? Leadership is important because the COs, that one man who commands all of that, needs to get that one fusilier into a position where he can have effect. And the only way that he can do that is through a chain of command and through leadership that understands a clear goal and understands a clear outcome. Perfect. Does anyone have any questions on that? So an American officer once said about the British that we write the best doctrine in the whole world. It's just a shame that none of us ever read it. I'm proud to say that that's not the case anymore, and we actually have a book which tells us how we should lead. Now, it's not prescriptive. It doesn't tell you exactly what you should do every minute and every day. It just gives you pointers on how you can be a potentially more effective leader. And this is what we fell back on when we found ourselves in a situation, COVID-19, that we had not experienced before. And suddenly we found ourselves having to apply lessons that were made for war fighting into lessons that were made for fighting a virus. This is probably the first time many of you have seen this quote. So Field Marshal Slim commanded the British forces who fought the Japanese in Burma, and he's famous for turning the tide on the war in the East. And as you'll know, a lot of unsung heroes came from that campaign. And he's held up famously as one of the best leaders ever to have come from the British Army. So every time you go on any course in the British Army, someone shows you this slide with this quote, which is possibly one of the most unhelpful quotes ever, because it gives you no practical guidance on how to actually be a leader. What I would say, though, is it empowers you and helps you to understand that your leadership style is underpinned on your own personal style. You can't teach yourself to be a perfect leader. You need to understand what motivates you as a person. You need to understand what motivates those who you serve. And you also need to understand the theory of leadership. And if you can understand all of those things, you can be a really effective leader. And I think actually, interestingly, key to that is actually understanding yourself and understanding who you are and being confident in yourself. And once you're confident in yourself and understand who you are, you can better understand other people and understand their motivations and use those to achieve success. So really unhelpful quote, but quite an empowering quote, I think. So the British Army has 2 key principles that it underpins leadership. So one is values-based leadership, and essentially that goes back to that point we were making earlier on about your soldiers knowing that you are going to never tell them to do something that is wrong, and you're never going to tell them to do something that you wouldn't be able to do. And most importantly, actually, you're never going to tell them to do something that is unlawful. And that trust underpins everything we do as leaders. We have to have complete trust in our subordinates, and they have to have complete trust in us that we're actually going to give them the right direction that's going to keep them safe. And understanding that we might find ourselves in a position as officers where we might actually be asking our soldiers to go into harm's way. And I think that's particularly key in the case of COVID-19. It's a frightening environment, and it's a dangerous front line to be battling on, as I'm sure everyone in the NHS knows only too well. And to be able to send our soldiers into that environment, and to be able to send our practitioners into that environment, those practitioners have to trust that we as leaders have their best interests at heart, and we're ultimately trying to do the right thing. And then the other more practical side of it is mission command. Now, simply put, that's telling people what to do, not how to do it. So it's empowering them, understanding their skills, and using those skills for those individuals to achieve effect. So I'll talk a little bit about our values and standards. So in the British Army, we have core values and core standards that everyone adheres to. So we get annual training on our values and standards to make sure that our soldiers and officers understand the importance of these values. And it also means that we have shared understanding and an agreement that we all adhere to these values and standards, and therefore that we all look out for each other. Now, interestingly, these values are actually punishable by military law. So as soldiers, we are all subject to military and civilian law. So civilian law, the same as you all and also military law, which deals with certain statutes that are put down in order to deal directly with the armed forces. And if you contravene any of our values and standards, you can actually be charged with a breach of military law. And I think you'd probably all agree, without going into too much detail, these are all the sort of things that you would expect from the British Army. So courage, and that's both physical and moral. So physical courage is easy to define, that is putting yourself in harm's way. Moral courage is having the courage to do the right thing, even when that might seem difficult. Discipline, both imposed discipline and self-discipline. So imposed, the army obviously imposed a strict code of conduct on us. For example, I have to iron my shirt every morning, but also we need to impose our own self-discipline. So that's taking time to look after yourself, so taking time to do your own physical exercise, taking time to learn about your job and be a professional. Those are all things that you're trusted to do. Respect for others. I think the army would, and any organisation, would fall flat on its face if you didn't respect everyone within the organisation that you worked in. And that cuts across diversity and inclusion. It cuts across day-to-day working environments. It cuts across lines of class. It cuts across everything. It cuts across seniority, and means that you can form a really effective team that trusts in the person next to them. Integrity. Now, this was always sold to me in Sandhurst as doing the right thing on a difficult day. So the easiest way of defining that is if you were walking on a completely empty street and you saw a little bit of litter in front of you, would you bend down and pick it up? So integrity, no one's watching you. There are no repercussions if you don't pick that piece of litter up. And also, no one's going to tell you that you're amazing if you do pick it up. But it's the right thing to do, and you should do that. Loyalty, and that's loyalty to each other and loyalty to the chain of command. And the way we talk about it is it's loyalty up and down the chain of command. So it's not just loyalty to those whose orders you have to follow, but it's those people who are giving orders need to be loyal to their subordinates and make sure they're working in their best interest. And selfless commitment. So you have to be willing to put yourself on the line for those that you serve with, both, again, your subordinates and those to the left and right of you. And then we also have our standards. So these are more tangible and more practical things. So we have to be lawful. So that's both civilian and military law. Appropriate behaviour, and I think that's key, particularly in the current climate, is everyone's behaviour should be appropriate at all times. And that is not only to protect the British Army's reputation, but also to ensure that actually people who are serving in the British Army are comfortable with each other and that people behave appropriately towards each other. And totally professional. And I think we hold that for any sort of career. Brilliant. So what I'd like to do now, very quickly, if it's okay with everyone, is just run a quick poll in terms of values and standards. So I'm afraid I don't know very much about values and standards within the NHS, but what would be interesting to know is whether or not the organisation that you work for at the lowest level has its own set of values and standards, and also whether those values and standards actually reflect your personal. Now, what I would say as well is this is entirely anonymous, so don't worry, no one's going to be able to see your answers. It's just a bit of a straw poll. So if we just have sort of we'll give it a minute on the timer on the quiz to see how we get on. Brilliant. Okay, well that's really positive, and is a really good thing to see that there is values and standards, and actually that people feel that those generally do reflect their own personal ones. So I think that's absolutely key and plays back into that point of having shared understanding and a shared moral compass that can guide your interactions as managers and as followers. So that's really good to see. I'll end the quiz there. And just because I can see quite a lot of you on the screen. So do any of you think that the values and standards I showed for the British Army, are there any elements in there that you think you'd like to take on for your own organisations? Trim with a nod of heads and a shake of heads. Do you think there's anything useful in the British Army's values and standards? Oh, stunned silence again. No nodding or shaking of heads. Okay, no problem.
I think, Sam, the thing that struck me was the bit about the breaching of the law, and we often talk about living values within the NHS, but we don't have anything quite as, if you don't live the standards, you've broken the law. That really struck me. I've never heard that before in any other organisation. So I think that really does mark you out and is a real challenge to us, to all of our organisations, really. But yeah.
I think ultimately, I think that's really interesting. But I've never really thought about it because for my whole working career, pretty much, apart from when I was an estate agent very briefly. So most of my working career.
You shouldn't have told that. It was going so well.
Yeah, everyone would have started signing off as soon as I said I used to be an estate agent. So yeah, I've always been subject to it, if that makes sense. It seems perfectly normal to be subject to this sort of thing when you're in the organisation, but actually it is a bit weird. And I think a lot of that is really to do with us being a reflection of society. And the British Army has to be a reflection of society because it has to be a reflection of the people it serves. And I think probably society would be pretty disappointed in us if we weren't held to those values and standards and weren't held in high office. But I'm just seeing in the chat that you guys couldn't see the outcome of the poll. And I should say that 100% of you do have values and standards from your organisation, and 93% actually felt that they chimed with their own values and standards. So that's really good to see. I'm also seeing in the chat as well some really interesting stuff, talking about the sort of things that they'd like to see for their own organisation is doing the right thing when no one's watching. So that's integrity, and I think that is probably one of the ones that in the military we'd hold up as really important as well, and courage. And I think for me, because actually in the army, you don't find yourself in harm's way as much as probably we used to, maybe under the Cold War and the Second World War, but actually moral courage being really important. So if you see something that someone is doing wrong, actually having the courage to stand up and say, no, that's wrong. And I think so many issues that have been in the paper with the army and with lots of organisations ultimately come down to courage, respect for others, and integrity. If you know what the right thing to do is, and you can do it when no one is watching, if you have the courage to tell people to do the right thing, and if you respect everyone around you, then you're never going to find yourself in a position where you're going to let down the team. So that's, I guess, what I'd take from there. Did anyone else have any other questions they'd like to draw out at this point?
Sam, so I'm Claire, the Director of Workforce for the Welsh Ambulance Service. I guess, hiya, thanks for this. I mean, it is interesting, isn't it? And I've got a couple of other questions that I'm just saving up for the end. But I suspect Ross, who's also got his hand up, has picked up on this issue of courage and what you just described there as moral courage. Because I do think we've seen over the last couple of months supreme efforts of courage in many respects from all of our people. Certainly across the NHS, working in environments where, the risk of picking up COVID has been high, and yet day in, day out, they have gone back out and done the job that they needed to do. And there's been a huge amount of fear. And I do wonder whether, as an organisation, we're about to do a bit of work on refreshing our own organisational behaviours and values. I do wonder whether this concept of moral courage and doing the right thing and everything will come and feature through far more strongly this time around than it maybe has in previous years. where it hasn't. It has been about accountability and care and compassion, all the right things. But I think it would be really interesting to see if that does feature now. And actually, I'd quite like to see it feature, because I think it is. We've just heard throughout the whole of today about doing the right thing, not being a bystander. You know, allowing people to make choices. So yeah, thanks for that. I think it's made me think quite a lot about how I might want to shape what we're doing locally.
Brilliant. Well, that's really great to hear. And I think that's a really interesting point, actually, is maybe moral courage coming off the back of physical courage. So I think, you know, the work that the NHS has done to put themselves, you know, in harm's way, that then, you know, there's been so much praise in the public, quite rightly, for the NHS. And I think actually we probably don't understand just how much harm people in the NHS are in day to day, particularly on that front line, but also in supporting roles. So there are people in supporting roles who are working, you know, I saw it when I was in Public Health Wales, who took no leave, no weekends, who were in the back working hard, absolutely embodying those values of courage and of integrity, but in a different way. So in a moral and in a intangible way that actually deserves to be celebrated as well. So I think that's really important. Ross, I think Ross has got his hand up as well.
Hi, yeah, sorry, my internet's not great for video, so I apologise. Yeah, just it was interesting you put a triad of the courage, integrity, and respect together, and it's something I've seen over the last 2 years in my own organisation in Paris as a council, that lots of people don't have that courage to put their head up and challenge people above them, but equally those above don't have the respect of those below them. So it was really good to see that from a military perspective. I'm a commissioned officer in the Air Cadets, so there's lots of synergies across your sea drills and our principles of our values of RISE. So it was really interesting to see how you link that into military law as well. So yeah, thank you. It's really interesting.
Great, thanks, Ross. No, that's a really good point. I don't think I've got anything to add on that. I think you summed that up really well. And I think that respect has to go both ways. And I think all too often, and the people in the army are guilty of this as well, is people in maybe higher positions don't understand that they actually need to earn the respect of those more junior to them. You know, you have to earn the respect of those people you lead. So I think that's a really good point. We'll push on here, because I'd like to get to mission command before we close and see your thoughts on that. It may be that we've got pretty good numbers, so I was planning a bit of breakout activity, and maybe we just cut that short to save ourselves a bit of time and just have a discussion on this again. So I guess the final part of this values-based leadership is actually the acronym leads itself, which is our leadership code. So I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on this, because I think they speak for themselves, really. And I almost think this is a case of the army loves acronyms. So we've squeezed a load of stuff into a really neat acronym here. But ultimately, the key here is rooted in those values and standards. So lead by example, absolutely. You know, that is that courage and integrity piece. Encourage thinking, that's empowering your subordinates, applying reward and discipline. That's making sure that, yes, people are told off, but they're also praised when they do something right. And you are going to, I think you're going to catch more bees with honey than you are with vinegar. And something like that, I've probably murdered it. But I think that's absolutely true. Is people respond more to being praised than they do to being told off. So always praise, and then don't necessarily. We talk about giving work on points. You give people work on points rather than actually telling them they're wrong. So never tell someone they're wrong. Just tell them that maybe they can work on something. Demanding high performance. You should demand high performance, but you need to perform highly yourself. Encourage confidence in the team. Recognise individual strengths and weaknesses, and strive for team goals. And And then there's just a neat way of tying those all together. So you need to challenge those underneath you. And I think people get bored if they're not challenged. And people actually want to be put under pressure and want to be challenged. But that has to be challenged within their own capability. You shouldn't challenge people with tasks that no one can achieve. Vision, so being a visionary leader, and also making sure that you support them. So the individuals have the resources and they also have the backing in the chain of command to make sure that they can achieve what you've asked them to do. So that takes us on to the second principle, which is mission command. And I'm hoping we'll have time to just chat about this in a little bit more detail in a few minutes. So mission command, summed up in short, is the absolute responsibility to act to achieve the superior commander's intent. So if you think back to Fusilier Jones, sitting in that battle group with 1,000 other soldiers, wondering what on earth is going on, he absolutely is there to achieve his superior commander's intent. Mission command is about how we get him to that position and empower him to do what he needs to do. And it depends on effective leadership at all levels, with the most junior commanders and private soldiers, Fusiliers, confident to use their initiative and understanding, and confident they have the trust of the chain of command and support of the chain of command. And simply put, it is the what, not the how. So you're telling people what to do, not micromanaging and telling them how to do it. Now, there are principles that go into mission command. The first of those is unity of effort, and that is the commander's ability to provide a clear intent and end state. So what is the end goal, what they're trying to achieve? It's founded on common understanding, working within a clearly defined framework and a shared foundation. And that goes back to me talking about how we all do the same training and we all understand where each other comes from. And it's also, we also talk about vertical and horizontal integration, which sounds a bit weird, but the vertical is a clear intent coming down from your higher leaders, and the horizontal integration is everyone understanding what's going on left and right of them. So it's understanding what they have to achieve, and it's also understanding what context they're in and what context they're trying to achieve that. And it's supported by a clear intent, and I'll come on to intent in just a minute. So freedom of action. Subordinates must be empowered to act freely and timely to make decisions within a framework and within the resources that they give them. And it requires really good information flow and soldiers and individuals who are comfortable acting in a timely manner, often with limited information. So we have a saying which is seek forgiveness, don't seek permission. So that is, do something. If you think it is the right thing to do and you think it is going to have a good effect, do it. And if you get it wrong, ask for forgiveness afterwards. Don't ask for permission, because the thing that's going to have the best effect is often delivered on the front line in a really quick situation, potentially when the supervisor is not there and someone just needs to act. So they need to have the confidence they can act. And then if that does go slightly wrong, that they have the support of their superiors to make sure they're not going to be thrown under the bus. Also, it's about decentralized execution with clear guidance, freedoms, and constraints. Trust, and I think that goes back to those values and standards. So it empowers decision making and unifies the team. Subordinates need to trust in their commanders to make good decisions and not put them in harm's way unnecessarily. But likewise, commanders need to trust subordinates to act on what they want them to do and to achieve it. So that's not micromanaging, that is trust. So trust people to achieve what we want them to do. And mutual understanding, like trust, is established over time and built on shared experiences. So that goes back to Ross's point, I think, about respect up and down the chain and having that mutual understanding. So it's easy for us in the army because we have common doctrine that we can fall back on and processes which allow us to understand what the other person is thinking about. And commanders must really ensure that they understand their people and their people's capabilities to ensure they give them good direction and support. And then the final one, we've already touched on it briefly, timely and effective decision making. This allows us to act quickly and make the decisions that ultimately could save someone's life or turn the tide of any plan that you're coming across. And these, it's asking me if I want to add 30 minutes. Do I want to add 30 minutes? That's the question.
Yeah, that's fine. Just count. I'll sort out. It's fine.
Mega. I've added 30 minutes. Exciting. Postpone the coffee break. And so that's all quite nebulous and sort of interesting pie in the sky stuff, how does that actually apply in reality? And it's really in two ways. It's an intent, so that is a statement which sets out the outcome, the objectives you need to achieve to get to that outcome, and what success actually looks like in the end. And then a main effort. So main effort is what is the one thing that has to be achieved for the plans to succeed. So think back to that massive battle group. Their intent might be to capture a town. But the main effort might be to get Fusilier Jones up his ladder and into the first window of the first house to do the job that he needs to do. So I've been a little bit presumptuous here, and I've had a go at writing an intent for if I was born guessing how I would attack COVID-19. So please try not to laugh at me. Take pity on me, and if I've got anything massively wrong from a technical perspective, be kind. So my intent, if I was the Health Minister for Wales, which thank goodness I'm not, would be that I intend to reduce the R rate of COVID-19 to below 1 throughout Wales. I will find new cases and understand how the virus is transmitted in order to disrupt further spread and protect vulnerable members of the community. Meanwhile, I'll develop comprehensive preventative measures in order to buy time to create and test an effective vaccine. At the end of this operation, the Welsh Government and the NHS will reduce the R rate of COVID-19 to below 1 in Wales. This will set the conditions for the creation of an effective vaccine against COVID-19. So what does that actually break down into? So the first one is the outcome. So what is the outcome you want to achieve? You set that up early. We call it a bottom line up front. So I intend to reduce the R rate of COVID-19 to below 1 throughout Wales. That's what we want to happen. What are then the objectives that have to be achieved to get to that outcome? And then they're grouped together in space and time. So you don't actually use specific dates. You know, that can become slightly embarrassing, as I think our Prime Minister has found when he set specific dates that he wants objectives to happen. But they should be grouped in time and space. So where and when are they going to happen? And those objectives are then put in capital so that they can be digested really simply. And then finally, you restate that outcome, and then you say what is going to be the next steps. So what is success? Success is getting the R rate below 1. What are the next steps? We're going to make a vaccine and cure everyone. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but hopefully what then happens at each level below that is each organisation and each part of that plan creates their own intent, and they then pass that down to their subordinates who create their own intent. And that cascades down, so there's that golden thread, that vertical understanding that ensures that everyone knows what has to be done and what a successful outcome looks like. I was going to do a poll at this point, but in the interest of time and everyone's coffee breaks, we won't go into a poll. I think this is hopefully something that could actually be of real practical use within the organisation. And as I previously mentioned, that's underpinned by a main effort. So that's the one thing that has to happen in order for the plan to work. So it is the action in the decisive part of the plan that breaks the back of whatever you're trying to achieve. So it's not the end state, it's not the start state, it's that decisive act that you're going to put all of your effort behind to get us up and over that hump. And it should be given to a person. It should be given to that person to achieve, but everyone should understand it. And that's that horizontal understanding that I was talking about. So one person is given that main effort, but everyone left and right of them knows what they need to do to support that main effort. And as I've just said, main effort is achieved. There's still work to be done, but you've broken the back of it, you've secured the initiative, and you're moving forward in the right direction to secure that outcome. And my rough cuff at the main effort for fixing COVID-19 is, for example, the main effort is to develop comprehensive preventative measures to combat the spread of the virus and the rise of public health risks. Now, I've probably not given that main effort to the right people, or I'm sorry if I have got that wrong. I'm not telling Public Health Wales to go and fix preventative measures. Please don't think that. But it's just an example of how you could potentially give a clear task to an organisation that they can then achieve, and that everyone left and right of them knows that they need to support them. So it doesn't become people acting in stovepipes. It suddenly becomes people who are acting right the way across the organisation in order to achieve a shared goal. Great. So at this point, we're going to do a breakout, but I think I've run over time, so apologies for that. What we will do is I'll leave this up before I get to my hilarious question slide. And at this point, I think, has anyone like to ask? I'd really like this just to be an open and honest discussion, and we'll tackle it that way.
Thank you, Sam. I think if people just want to contribute, that might be the best way to do it. I can see a couple of hands up, and we'll come back to those in a minute or two. I know Claire's got some questions, so obviously I'll do my best to run out of time to avoid her asking any. But just to say a huge, and that was brilliant. I took some real key things away from that about understanding and being confident in yourself to help others. The idea of trusting young people, leadership with clear goals and clear outcomes, and I particularly like the work on points. That's something I'm definitely going to take away. So there we go. So any hands up? I'll come to Claire in a minute. Anybody else that's got a hand that wants to ask a question?
So this is it.
Claire,
This
is it. Claire's got a moment.
Ah, perfect. I was just about to say as well. There's a saying in the army that there is no such thing as a stupid question, and that is absolutely true. Because if anyone's got a question, sorry,
you haven't heard Claire yet.
I knew exactly what he was going to say.
No, over to you, Claire.
Right, so Sam, thanks for that. Really good, really interesting. Lots to think about there. I like the mission command stuff as well. It's an interesting way of us looking at our objectives and how we set our objectives in a different way. The one question, because I know we haven't got a lot of time, that I'm really interested in, and I've listened to quite a few people talk about leadership in the forces, is around, simple question first of all, the leadership booklet that you give out, who gets it? So is leadership seen as something that comes from rank and hierarchy, or is leadership seen as a choice where actually it's a dispersed model of leadership, so everyone is a leader in many respects?
Yeah, so absolutely hit the nail on the head there. It is absolutely a dispersed model. So yes, there is rank, but largely rank is attached to role and is attached to legal stuff. So command has a legal aspect, which I won't go into now because it's incredibly boring. But leadership is irrespective of rank. So there's a fantastic vignette from Dunkirk where an army unit had been asked to hold the line in order for the rest of the British Army to escape Dunkirk. And by the time the messenger arrived at this unit, the only person who was still left there was a private soldier. And he stepped up and took command of the soldiers that were still there in order to achieve that intent, which was to hold their position. And I think that is still the position we want to be in now. And it goes back to integrity and courage. You can see the most junior soldier who is as quiet as a mouse in barracks, and then you go on exercise or on operations, and suddenly he becomes a natural leader. And that's absolutely, the space that we're in. So that leadership book is available digitally, so that everyone can see it, and it is part of mandatory annual training for absolutely every rank in the British Army. So it is absolutely bottom up.
And I think, that's one of the fundamental differences that we haven't yet got right in the NHS. We've talked quite a lot about leadership and leadership at every level, but we don't tell people that they're leaders as soon as they start in the organisation. And we don't put that in people's minds that you're a leader and this is what that looks like and this is what we expect of you. So I think there's something really fundamental for us to learn there, as well as the principle that you were talking about is that your people have got to basically trust you to protect them and keep them safe. And if they trust you to protect them and keep them safe, then they equally will protect you and keep you safe and go over and above in supporting you. And I think again that's a fundamental lesson for us all, really, in how we're taking forward leadership in our organisation. So something for us to really reflect on. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
Sam, thank you very much. That takes us beautifully up to 3 o'clock. So just to say thank you ever so much again on behalf of the whole group. Absolutely fantastic to listen to you. And as I said earlier on, some real lessons that we can learn from that. And whilst I appreciate what you said at the start about this being a two-way thing, it's been brilliant to listen to you. And thank you very much for sharing your lessons and experience with us this afternoon. Perfect.
Thank you, Phil. No, it's been an absolute pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. What I would say as well is the organisers have got my email address, my contact details. So if anyone wants a copy of, in fact, questions that they'd like answered, I guess anonymously, feel free to fire those in to Sarah and Zoe, and they've got my details, and I'm more than happy to answer those slow time following on. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you. We'll see you all, let you sign out, everybody, and see you back in the plenary session in a moment.
What time are we back, Phil?
Quarter past.
Go that to Zoe. Go on, Zoe.
3:15.
3:15. There we go.
Thank you.
Got a few minutes. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.